As my second front tooth flew from my mouth, I understood that would be the last time he'd raise his hand to me. In the house where the uniform was law, I learned that even the most powerful can fall with a whisper in the night. Good morning, my dears. How are you all doing? I'm Martha Hillman, 72 years old, living in this simple but love-filled little house in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. I was born in Waterville, but life brought me here many years ago, and this is where I made my little corner of the world. These days my greatest pleasure is tending to my plants. I have a garden out back that's my little piece of heaven on earth. Lavender, rosemary, mint, basil. Every medicinal and aromatic herb you can imagine, you'll find here. I make my own teas and home remedies, you know. Learned from my grandmother and perfected it over the years. The neighbors always come by asking for a tea for headaches, a compress for arthritis, a tonic to boost their energy. I started this herb garden after moving here when I was already 45. It was a fresh start, you see. Before that, I barely had time to look at the sky, let alone tend to plants. Life wasn't always this peaceful heaven I have now. I planted each seedling with my own hands, sometimes crying, sometimes laughing, but always believing that something beautiful could grow even after so many storms. I'm sitting here on my porch in a rocking chair my son gave me as a gift. From here, I can see the street, children playing, life passing by more slowly than in the big cities. The wind brings the smell of wet earth. It rained early this morning and mixes with the aroma of the cheddar biscuits I just pulled from the oven for afternoon coffee. Oh, before I continue my story, I want to make a special request to those watching. Tell me in the comments, what little town are you watching from? And what time of day did you find this video? Early morning with your coffee, after lunch, or already in the evening? I always read all the comments and I'm so happy to know where you're from, and when you take a little time from your day to listen to this grandma's stories. Tell me, okay, let's create a chain of kindness. You know, today I want to tell you a story I kept hidden for many years. It's about how I learned that strength isn't in muscles, or in ranks, or in shouting. True strength is in the courage to change what seems impossible to change. It's about a girl who grew up without a father, but who ended up meeting another kind of man. A man who wore a uniform and brought shadows into the home. I'm going to tell you what it was like living under that roof, and how even in the darkest situations, there's always a way out when we decide we deserve something better. Part 1. The simple beginning. I was born in Waterloo, a small town in Iowa, in a simple wood frame house with high ceilings and a backyard full of fruit trees. My mother, Margaret, we called her Maggie, was a beautiful woman with long hair and green eyes who worked as a seamstress to support the household. My brother, William, was 2 years older than me, a quiet boy who spent most of his time reading comics and listening to the radio. I grew up without knowing my father. He left before I was even born, leaving my mother 8 months pregnant with a 2-year-old boy to raise alone. Mom said his name was Eugene, a man with a silver tongue and little responsibility. He had the gift of words and lies, she'd say. The few times she spoke of him, she'd tell us he was the kind of man who only showed up to borrow money and seek female company. One day, he simply never came back. Our house was on Maple Street, number 23. It was small but cozy. It had 2 bedrooms, one for my mother and another I shared with my brother, a living room that also served as Mom's workspace, a kitchen with a wood stove, and an outdoor bathroom. The floor was worn linoleum, but Mom kept it spotlessly clean, mopping it daily to keep it shining. In the backyard we had an apple tree, a cherry tree, and some chickens that gave us fresh eggs every morning. Life was simple but had its routine. We'd wake up with the Ruers's crow around 5 in the morning. Mom was already up lighting the stove to make coffee and oatmeal for breakfast. After eating, William and I would walk to the public school about 20 minutes away. On the way, we'd play counting cars and trucks that passed. Whoever saw more got to choose the first game on the way back from school. At school, I was a good student, especially in English. My brother had more difficulty but excelled in math. At recess, I'd play hopscotch, jump rope, and foursquare with my friends Susan and Dorothy. William usually stayed alone watching the other boys play football with an old leather ball. He was never one to mix much. We'd come home for lunch. Mom would stop her sewing to serve us rice, beans, and when we could afford it, some vegetables from the garden or a piece of meat. Then, while she went back to work on her Singer sewing machine, making that characteristic sound, tack tack tack. We do our homework and help with household chores. I liked cleaning the yard and feeding the chickens. William helped wash dishes and fetch wood for the stove. In the late afternoon, when the sun was cooler, it was time to play. I'd go out to the street and meet the neighborhood kids. We'd play hide-and-seek, tag, and my favorite jacks. That game with the little metal pieces you throw up and have to catch before they fall. William almost never joined us. He preferred to stay in our room, taking apart and putting together old things he found around the yard. On Sundays, we'd go to the little church on the town square, all white with a steeple that stood out against Iowa's blue sky. After service, Mom would buy us a piece of taffy to share, our treat for the week. That was also when we'd visit downtown with its tree-lined square, bandstand, and some stores we could only admire through the windows. That's how it was until I was 9. That's when things started to change. I remember well, the day Mom came home with a different sparkle in her eyes. "I met a good man," she said, fixing her hair in the cracked mirror in the living room. "A respected man in town, Captain August from the state police. He wants to meet you." Part 2, The Captain's Arrival. Captain August started coming to our house on Sundays. He'd always come after church, well, dressed in his impeccable uniform full of brass buttons. He'd bring candy for William and me and flowers for Mom. He spoke little, but when he opened his mouth, everyone fell silent to listen. He'd tell stories from the state police about criminals he'd captured, about how he maintained order in the city. William looked at him fascinated. I confess, felt a chill in my stomach when he arrived. It wasn't fear yet. It was more of a discomfort, as if something was warning me that those hard eyes hid secrets. 6 months later, Mom called us for a talk. "Captain August has asked for my hand in marriage," she said. Her cheeks flushed like we hadn't seen in a long time. "We're moving to his house. It's bigger, nicer. You'll have separate rooms. I won't need to sew so much anymore. You'll go to a better school." William smiled, excited by the idea. I tried to smile, too, but something inside me felt heavy as lead. Within a week, we packed our few things and moved to the other side of town to a brick house with large windows, a front porch, and a well-kept lawn. It was another world, a world we'd soon discover had its own rules, very different from the ones we knew. Part 3, The Transformation. The move to Captain August House seemed like a dream at first. We had individual rooms with real beds, no more mattresses on the floor. The kitchen had a gas stove, refrigerator, and a big table where we could all sit together for meals. The bathroom had hot water. Imagine the joy of taking a warm shower without needing to heat water on the wood stove. In the first weeks, the captain was attentive. He'd get up early, put on his impeccable uniform, and before leaving, he'd kiss Mom on the forehead, and wish William and me a good day. He'd arrive for dinner punctually at 7:00 in the evening, tell some stories from his work, and then listen to the radio in the living room, while Mom cleaned up the kitchen. It was gradually that things began to change so slowly we barely noticed until everything was different. First came the small rules. A police officer's wife must keep the house impeccable. He'd tell Mom, "Girls can't wear shorts outside. It doesn't look good for a captain's family," he determined when I asked to go play with the neighbors on a hot January day. Soon came more rules, rigid schedules for everything, waking up, eating, studying, sleeping. The dinner table had assigned seats with the captain always at the head. No one could start eating before him. No one could speak during the meal unless he asked something. The radio, which used to be our entertainment, could now only be turned on at specific times, and only to listen to the news. I was 11 when I realized our house had turned into a barracks. Mom, who used to hum while sewing, now walked silently through the house, always alert, as if afraid of doing something wrong. William, on the other hand, seemed to adapt well to the new routine. He admired the captain, followed his orders without question, and even began to imitate his way of walking with his chest puffed out and chin raised. "One day I'll be like Dad," he told me one afternoon while we were in the backyard. The dad, he mentioned, gave me chills. To me that man would never be my father. Part 4, The Escalation. I began to notice how the captain's look changed when Mom didn't immediately obey an order. It became hard, cold, as if something dark passed behind his eyes. Then came that low, controlled voice that was worse than any shout. "Margaret, come here." And they'd go to the bedroom from where sometimes came sounds I pretended not to hear. It was around this time that I had my first direct experience with the captain's discipline. I was in charge of washing and ironing clothes. Among them was the white shirt of his dress uniform that he'd wear to an important ceremony. While ironing the shirt, I didn't notice the iron was dirty and ended up leaving a yellowish stain on the sleeve. I tried everything to remove it. Detergent, lemon, even bleach. Nothing worked. The fabric was left with a faded mark impossible to hide. When he came home and saw the shirt, a heavy silence fell over the house. Mom lowered her eyes. William quickly went to his room. I was left alone in the living room with the captain, who held the stained shirt, with both hands as if evaluating not just the fabric, but my entire existence. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" His voice was low, but each word felt like a stone. "Do you have any idea what this shirt means? It's respect, authority. It's what separates order from chaos." I tried to explain, to apologize, to say it was an accident, but the words died when I saw his eyes. I'll never forget that look. It wasn't anger. It was something colder, more calculated. What happened next? I prefer not to go into details. Let's just say I learned that day that the captain's discipline left marks. Some visible, others not. Marks that took time to heal. From that day on, life in the house followed a pattern. The captain always found something that wasn't up to his expectations. A glass out of place, incomplete homework, an answer he considered insolent. And for each failure, there was a consequence. Part 5, Breaking Point. The months that followed were the darkest of my youth. After the uniform incident, it was as if a barrier had been broken. What used to happen with some intervals of calm had now become almost daily. The captain's house turned into a war zone, where each room held memories of lost battles. At 17, I had already learned to anticipate the signs. The specific creak of the gate when he arrived. The sound of military shoes on the floorboards. The way he placed his cap on the entry table. Every detail could reveal what kind of night we'd have. A carefully positioned cap meant a quiet day at the station. Thrown carelessly, predicted trouble. Mom had also developed this ability. We communicated with looks. A simple raise of her eyebrows warned me to stay in my room, out of the way. A discreet nod indicated the coast was clear for me to go to the kitchen or bathroom without being noticed. The worst weren't the physical punishments, though they left marks I still carry today. The worst was the constant humiliation, the feeling of never being enough, of being inferior just for being born a woman. "Women are like recruits," he used to say during dinner, looking from me to Mom. "They only learn through discipline. The difference is that a recruit eventually becomes a soldier. A woman is always a recruit." William at 19 no longer disguised his contempt for us. He repeated the captain's phrases, imitated his gestures, and what hurt me most sometimes stood watching when our stepfather corrected us with a strange gleam in his eyes. That quiet boy who shared comics and dreams with me in our old house had completely disappeared. One night, the captain came home later than usual. From the smell, you could tell he'd stopped at the bar before coming home. These were the worst days. Alcohol didn't make controlled like it does with many men. On the contrary, it made him more methodical, more calculating in his corrections. That night, dinner wasn't ready because he hadn't warned he'd be late. That was the trigger. What followed was a session of shouting about respect, hierarchy, and a wife's role. Mom tried to explain, but each word seemed to fan his fury even more. I was in the kitchen trying to quickly prepare something to calm things down when I heard the sound. That dry sound I'll never forget. I ran to the living room and saw Mom on the floor, her hand on her face, a trickle of blood running from the corner of her mouth. The captain stood, adjusting his shirt cuff as if he'd just signed a document, not assaulted his wife. Something inside me exploded. Without thinking, I placed myself between them. "Enough!" I shouted, trembling from head to toe, but firm as I'd never been. "Don't touch her again." The silence that followed was deafening. The captain looked at me as if seeing a wild animal that had dared enter his well-ordered house. Then slowly a cold smile formed on his lips. Well, the recruit thinks she's become a general. What happened next is etched in my memory in disconnected flashes. I remember the first blow that made me stagger backward. I remember Mom screaming, begging him to stop. I remember William standing at the door, eyes wide, finally seeming to realize the monstrosity happening right before him. I remember above all the moment I fell and felt something warm and metallic in my mouth. In the fall, I'd hit my face on the corner of the table. When I brought my hand to my lips, my fingers found an empty space where a tooth had been. The pain came later, sharp, throbbing. The captain stopped, not from remorse, but because blood in the living room meant disorder, and disorder was unacceptable in his house. "Clean this up," he ordered, as if I'd simply spilled a glass of water. Then he left, slamming the door hard enough to make the windows rattle. Part 6, The Decision. Mom helped me up and took me to the bathroom. While she cleaned my injured face, she cried silently. "Why did you do that, girl? You know it's worse when someone confronts him." "I couldn't stand seeing him hurt you anymore, Mom," I replied, my voice distorted by pain and the gap in my mouth. She shook her head. "He's the man of the house. We need him." Those words hit me harder than any blow. It was there, looking at my mother's resigned face, that I understood she would never leave that situation. She had accepted that life as her destiny. In the following days, I avoided the captain like one avoids a venomous snake. I stayed in my room as much as possible, only going out when I was sure he wasn't home, speaking the bare minimum during meals. The lost tooth left a gap in my smile, a constant reminder of the price of defying authority. It was around this time that I began to notice the guns. The captain always had guns in the house. He was a police officer, after all. His service pistol was kept in a locked drawer in their bedroom. But there was another, a backup weapon he kept hidden among the uniforms in the closet. One afternoon, while organizing his clothes, a task I hated but was forced to do, I saw the gun's handle among the neatly folded shirts. A shiver ran down my spine, not from fear of the weapon itself, but from the sudden idea that crossed my mind like lightning. That night, lying in bed, I couldn't sleep. The image of the gun kept returning, insistent as a nightmare. What if, I thought, only to push the thought away. But it came back, each time clearer, more defined. A week after the incident with the lost tooth, I lost the second one. It was because of a broken glass, a simple glass that slipped from my hands during dinner. The captain didn't say anything. He simply stood up, walked around the table, and in a movement too quick for me to defend myself, struck my face with the back of his hand, where his police academy class ring worked as an efficient weapon. This time, William didn't just watch. When he saw the damage, my split lip and another tooth hanging loose in my blooded gum, something seemed to awaken in him. He didn't say anything, didn't interfere, but at night, he came to my room. "Martha," he whispered, standing at the door like a shadow. "This isn't right. What he's doing, it's not discipline, it's..." He didn't finish the sentence, but he didn't need to. After years, it was the first acknowledgement that what we were living wasn't normal, wasn't acceptable. "Why are you only realizing this now?" I asked through sobs. He lowered his eyes. "I wanted to be like him, strong, respected. But this isn't strength. It's..." Again words failed him. That night, something changed between William and me. We didn't go back to being the close siblings from childhood, but a silent understanding formed. We were survivors of the same shipwreck, even though he had tried for years to pretend the ship wasn't sinking. Part 7. The plan. At 18, I was a shadow of the girl I had been. 2 teeth missing, physical scars that time would soften, and emotional wounds that never fully healed. My dreams of studying, having a career, seeing the world beyond those walls had been crushed under the captain's polished boot. The incident that almost pushed me to the limit happened on a Sunday afternoon. The captain had gone out for a state police commitment, some decoration ceremony. Mom took the opportunity to take me downtown to buy fabric for new dresses. It was our small act of rebellion, going out without asking permission. We were coming back carrying our purchases when we saw him on the corner talking with other officers. We tried to turn around, but it was too late. He saw us. He didn't say anything there in front of his colleagues. He just waved like the loving husband and stepfather everyone in town thought he was. The punishment came at night. For the first time, Mom also received the same discipline as me. I watched paralyzed with horror while he methodically corrected our disobedience. When he finished, we were both on the living room floor holding each other like disaster survivors. It was there, feeling my mother's fragile body trembling next to mine, that I made my decision. This couldn't continue. I had to do something, anything. The idea that had emerged weeks before upon seeing the backup weapon now took definite shape in my mind. It wouldn't be easy. It would be dangerous. But living that way was no longer living. It was just surviving day after day, waiting for the next blow, the next humiliation. That night, when everyone was asleep, I made a silent vow to myself this would end one way or another. Part 8. The night everything changed. The days following the unauthorized outing incident were tense like never before. The captain seemed to be constantly watching us, like a snake ready to strike. There was a different energy in him, a macabre expectation, as if he were just waiting for the next mistake to justify an even more severe punishment. Mom walked through the house like a ghost, avoiding any noise, any gesture that might attract attention. Her face, once beautiful and full of life, now looked like a wax mask with dull eyes that had lost all hope. The purple marks on her arms were hidden under long sleeves, even in the January heat. One afternoon, while tidying the captain and Mom's room, a task he insisted I do daily, I found something that froze my blood. It was a small notebook, pocket-sized, hidden among his clothes. I'd never seen that notebook before, and moved by a curiosity stronger than fear, I opened it. What I found there was like being punched in the stomach. In meticulous letters typical of a man who valued order above all, there was a list of mine and Mom's infractions, with dates, detailed descriptions, and most disturbing pending corrections. The captain was keeping a record, as if we were prisoners in his private concentration camp, and from the number of items marked as pending, he was saving punishments to apply at the moment he deemed appropriate. I closed the notebook with trembling hands, and put it exactly where it was. At that moment, a certainty formed within me. It wasn't just a matter of enduring until things got better. They would never get better. In fact, from what I saw in the notebook, they were about to get considerably worse. On Wednesday night, I put the plan into action. I asked Mom to let me prepare dinner. Something unusual as this was exclusively her task. "You look tired, Mom. Let me do it today," I said, trying to keep my voice natural. She agreed, surprised but grateful for the rest. While cooking, I memorized every detail of the plan. The gun was in the third space of the closet between the white shirts. The captain would arrive around 9. Mom would be asleep by 10:00. The backyard had tall grass in the back near the lemon tree. A good place to hide something temporarily. I served dinner at 8, as he demanded, even when he wasn't home. Mom ate little, as always. William devoured his portion and went to his room to study for the Stakepus exam he'd take the following month. The irony didn't escape me. I saved a plate for the captain as was the custom. At 9:15, I heard the gate creak. From the heavy footsteps and the way the door slammed, I knew he was coming from the bar, probably more altered than normal. I served him dinner in silence, responding only, "Yes, sir," to the few questions he asked. I felt his gaze evaluating me, looking for some fault to point out, but I maintained the perfect posture that years of fear had taught me. After dinner, he went to the bedroom. I heard the shower being turned on. He always showered before bed, another predictable habit. I waited in the kitchen, washing dishes carefully not to make noise. My heart was beating so hard I was sure it could be heard throughout the house. When the shower noise stopped, I waited another 15 minutes, enough time for him to get dressed and prepare for bed. Then, with silent steps, I went to their room. The door was ajar. Another of his habits. He never completely closed doors because he liked to hear everything that happened in the house. I peeked through the crack. Mom was already lying down with her back to the door. The captain was sitting on the edge of the bed, his back to me, applying some kind of ointment to his hands, probably for the aching joints he always complained about. The closet was on the other side of the room, partially open. It was the perfect moment, but I couldn't move. My feet seemed nailed to the floor, my breath caught in my throat. Planning was one thing, executing was quite another. I retreated, returning to my room with my heart racing. Lying in bed, I called myself a coward. The list of pending corrections came back to my mind along with the image of Mom's injured face, her deadened look, and my own injuries, the lost teeth, the daily humiliations. But even so, I couldn't act. Not that night. The next morning, I woke up with a strange feeling. The captain had already left for work as always. Mom was preparing coffee in silence. When I sat at the table, she served me. And then I noticed something on her face, a new bruise, fresh near her left eye. Another correction applied while I cowered. What happened, Mom? I asked, though I knew the answer. She looked away. Nothing. I hit the corner of the dresser. The lie was so obvious, so rehearsed that I felt a wave of nausea. How many times had she said this to neighbors, to relatives, to herself? How many imaginary dresser corners had hurt us both over the years? At that moment, something inside me hardened. Fear gave way to cold, calculating determination. I couldn't postpone anymore. It would have to be that night. Part 9, The Moment of Truth. That night, the plan took its final shape. During the day, I noticed the captain had left his uniform to be washed. With the excuse of doing laundry, I carefully searched the pockets for his backup weapon, but found nothing. He always emptied his pockets before leaving clothes to wash. Another inviolable rule of the house. My plan was crumbling before it even began. Without access to the weapon, what could I do? Despair began to invade me again. That's when I noticed something. His office door was open, a small room, almost a closet, where he kept important documents. And yes, where he sometimes left the backup weapon when he arrived late and didn't want to make noise in the bedroom. With my heart pounding, I approached the office. The door was just pushed closed, not completely shut. I pushed it slightly and looked inside. On the desk, illuminated by moonlight coming through the small window, was the leather case I knew well, the gun case. My hands were shaking so much I could barely open the clasp. When I finally did, there it was, the black pistol, heavy, loaded with the power to change destinies. I had never held a gun before. The weight surprised me, as did the cold feeling of metal against my skin. I closed the empty case and left it exactly where it was. I hid the gun under my blouse and silently left the office. Every floorboard seemed to want to betray me, creaking under my feet. But I managed to reach the back door without waking anyone. The backyard was dark and silent, only illuminated by the crescent moon. The tall grass in the back near the lemon tree was the perfect hiding place. I knelt and with still trembling hands, hid the gun among the tree's roots, covering it with loose dirt and grass. I mentally marked the spot, making sure I could find it again. I went back inside, washed my hands in the kitchen sink, and went to my room. Lying in bed, looking at the ceiling, I knew I had crossed a line from which I couldn't return. The captain's gun was missing. When he noticed, and he would notice sooner or later, hell would break loose. He would turn the house upside down, interrogate each of us, and the punishment for the guilty party would be unimaginable. But I didn't intend to be there when that happened, nor did I intend for him to be in any condition to punish anyone. The next morning, I woke up before everyone. The sun had barely risen when I went out to the backyard with the excuse of picking lemons for breakfast. Actually wanted to check if the gun was still where I had hidden it. It was there, just a small elevation in the dirt revealing its presence. The day passed normally. The captain left for work. William went to his technical school classes. Mom and I stayed home doing our routine tasks. Except nothing was normal for me. Every minute that passed was a minute closer to the decisive moment. In the afternoon, the captain came home earlier than usual. There was something different about him. A contained energy, a considerable tension in the way he walked around the house, examining every corner. When he passed by the office, he stopped. He stood there at the door for what seemed like an eternity. Then he went in, closing the door behind him. The silence that followed was the heaviest I'd ever felt. Mom and I were in the kitchen preparing dinner, both noticing something was wrong, but without the courage to comment. Minutes later, he came out of the office and went straight to the bedroom. More silence and then the sound I feared. Drawers being opened forcefully, objects being moved. He had noticed. Margaret, Martha, come here now. His voice echoed through the house like thunder. Mom and I exchanged a quick look. In hers, I saw fear. In mine, she must have seen something different because she frowned, confused. The captain was waiting for us in the middle of the living room, his face red with contained fury. My gun is missing the backup. I want to know where it is, and I want to know now. Mom went pale. What gun, August? I don't know what you're talking about. I lied with the same conviction. I haven't seen any gun, sir. He watched us for a long moment, his eyes passing from one to the other, as if he could extract the truth just with his gaze. If I find out one of you is lying. He left the threat hanging. more frightening for not being explicit. That night, no one slept peacefully in the house. The captain turned every room upside down, opened every drawer, looked under every piece of furniture. He found nothing. Of course, he didn't search the backyard. Why would he? In his ordered and hierarchical mind, it didn't make sense for a gun to be buried under the lemon tree. The next day, the tension was palpable. The captain left early, saying he would report the weapon's disappearance at the station. If someone used it for something, I'll know. And whoever did it will wish they were never born. When he left, I looked at Mom. There was something different about her too. A gleam in her eyes I hadn't seen in years. It was you, wasn't it? She asked in a low voice. I didn't answer, which was answer enough. What do you intend to do, Martha? Her voice wasn't accusatory. It was curious, almost hopeful. What should have been done a long time ago, Mom, she nodded slowly. She didn't say anything else, but I felt that somehow I had her silent approval. Part 10. The final night. That night, the captain came home late. From the smell, he had stopped at the bar again. He was in a bad mood, grumbling about incompetence, about how no one took the gun's disappearance seriously. I'll have to replace it out of my own pocket, he complained during dinner. These idiots think guns grow on trees. The irony of the phrase almost made me smile. Almost. After he went to sleep later than usual, after drinking almost half a bottle of whiskey in the living room, I waited. This time, the wait wasn't to steal the gun. The gun was already with me. The wait was to use it. The early morning was hot and stuffy, typical of January in Iowa. Sweat ran down my back as I crept through the backyard to the lemon tree. The dirt was soft, easy to remove with my hands. In a few seconds, my fingers found the cold metal of the pistol. I carefully cleaned the dirt from the gun, checking if it was in working condition. I didn't know much about guns, but the captain sometimes talked about how to maintain them, and I had paid attention. The pistol seemed in perfect condition, despite the night spent in the damp earth. With the gun secure in my hands, I went back to the house. Each step was like walking in a dream or nightmare. Part of me still didn't believe what I was about to do. But another part, the part that had suffered years of abuse, that had seen my mother's suffering, that carried the physical and emotional scars inflicted by that man, that part knew there was no turning back. The hallway to the captain and Mom's room had never seemed so long. The door was ajar, as always. From inside came the sound of his snoring, heavy from alcohol. I pushed the door slightly, trying not to make noise. The room was dark, only illuminated by moonlight coming through the window. I could see their silhouettes in bed. Mom on one side, the captain on the other. He slept on his back, his chest rising and falling with heavy breathing. I approached slowly, the gun now steady in my hands. Fear had given way to a strange calm, almost supernatural. It was as if I were outside my body, observing the scene from afar. I stopped beside the bed, looking at man had turned our life into hell. In sleep, his face was relaxed, almost peaceful, so different from the mask of authority and cruelty he wore when awake. For a brief moment, I hesitated. Would I be able to do this? Then I remembered everything. The years of humiliation, the screams, the blows, the lost teeth, Mom's dead look. The notebook with the list of pending corrections, the certainty that as long as he lived, we would never be free. I aimed the gun. The shot sounded like thunder in the silent night. Part 11. For an instant later, everything changed forever. Mom woke up startled, her eyes wide with horror when she understood what had happened. Captain August didn't move again. The bed, once the territory of our fear, became the scene of our liberation. My God, Martha, what have you done? Mom whispered, her voice trembling, her hands covering her mouth. I stood there paralyzed, the gun still warm in my hands. A strange calm invaded me, as if a storm that had raged inside me for years had finally passed. The sound seemed distant, muffled, as if I were underwater. William appeared at the door, awakened by the noise. His eyes, sleepy at first, soon widened as he understood the scene. He looked at the captain, at the gun in my hands, and then directly into my eyes. I thought he would scream, that he would run for help, that would turn me in. After all, for years he had been the captain's faithful apprentice, absorbing his values, imitating his gestures. But something unexpected happened. William entered the room, closed the door behind him, and with a voice I didn't recognize immediately, deeper, more decisive, said, "We need to get him out of here now." That night turned into a feverish nightmare of practical actions. William took charge with surprising efficiency, as if he had rehearsed that moment. We need blankets and ropes. We're taking him to the back of the yard. Mom remained sitting on the bed, her eyes fixed on her husband's motionless body. Is he really gone? She asked, her voice small like a lost child's. Yes, Mom. William replied with a gentleness I hadn't seen in him for years. He'll never hurt you again. While Mom stayed in the room, William and I executed the improvised plan. We wrapped the body in old blankets, tied them with ropes to make transport easier. It was difficult, heavy, but fear and adrenaline gave us strength we didn't know we possessed. At the back of the yard, behind the lemon tree where the gun had spent the previous night, William began to dig. The earth was soft because of recent rain, which made the work easier. I helped as I could, taking turns in the task of digging a hole that would be large enough. While we dug, William spoke quietly, as if afraid the house walls might hear us. I knew one day this would happen. I didn't know how or when, but I knew it had to end. Why did you never help us? I asked, my hands aching from the effort of digging. Why did you take his side? William stopped, leaning on the shovel. In the dark, his face looked older, more tired than a 20-year-old should look. At first, I really believed he was right, that discipline was necessary, that men should command. I wanted to be like him, respected, feared. He resumed digging before continuing. But when I saw what he did to your face, when I saw the teeth, something broke inside me. I realized it wasn't discipline. It was cruelty. It wasn't strength. It was cowardice. A single tear ran down my brother's dirt-covered face. Forgive me, Martha. I should have protected you. I didn't respond immediately. Years of resentment don't disappear in a single night. But I nodded, acknowledging his pain, his guilt. Perhaps forgiveness would come with time. When the hole was deep enough, we placed the wrapped body inside. William picked up the shovel to start covering it with dirt, but I stopped him. Wet, I said, and knelt at the edge of the hole. I looked one last time at the covered volume that represented the man who had turned our life into hell. I felt no remorse, just immense relief. This is for what you did to our family, I whispered, throwing the first shovel full of dirt. We worked in silence for the next few minutes, covering the hole, smoothing the dirt, spreading dry leaves on top to disguise the spot. When we finished, it looked like nothing had been disturbed. The lemon tree continued there, its leaves swaying slightly in the night breeze, silent guardian of our secret. Part 12. New beginnings. We returned to the house, exhausted, covered in dirt. Mom was still in the bedroom, sitting on the edge of the bed, looking at the empty space where there had once been a man she feared more than loved. It's done, said William. Now we need to clean everything and decide what to do next. It was a long night of cleaning. Every trace, every drop, every evidence of what had happened needed to disappear. We changed the sheets, scrubbed the floor, cleaned the gun, and put it back in the case in the office. A crucial detail of the plan William developed while we worked. Tomorrow we'll say he left early before we woke up. He explained that he took a suitcase seemed rushed. If anyone asks, we don't know where he went. Maybe he was transferred on emergency. Maybe he went to investigate the missing gun case. We don't know. What if they don't believe us? Mom asked, her voice weak. They will believe, William replied firmly. Men like him with authority sometimes disappear on missions. No one will question much, at least not at first. When the sun began to rise, we were sitting in the kitchen drinking coffee in silence. Fatigue weighed on us, but also a strange lightness. It was as if the air in the house was different, more breathable. We can't stay here. I finally said this house. I couldn't finish the sentence. Is cursed. Mom completed, surprising me with the firmness in her voice. It was the first complete sentence she'd said since the incident. We were never happy here. We never will be. William nodded. We can sell it. Say we're moving closer to family since the captain disappeared. He hesitated on the last word as if testing how it sounded. With the money, we can start over somewhere else. Far from here, I added. Very far. In the following weeks, we lived in a strange normality. William took it upon himself to communicate the captain's disappearance to his state police colleagues. He was worried about the missing gun. Said he was going to investigate personally, took some clothes. Said it might take a while. The colleagues accepted the explanation without much questioning, as William had predicted. After all, secret missions weren't uncommon. As the days passed, some came to ask if we had news, if he had called. We always said no, with carefully rehearsed expressions of concern. The official investigation only began a month later when the prolonged absence became impossible to ignore. Police officers came to the house, asked questions, wrote down answers. We were the worried family anxious for news. William, the dedicated son taking on responsibilities in his stepfather's absence. Mom, the apprehensive wife praying for her husband's return. Me, the obedient stepdaughter, helping maintain the house in order while we waited. No one questioned the two-teeth myth from my smile. No one asked about the bruises that were still fading from Mom's arms. No one suspected that the family mourning the absence was actually silently celebrating newly acquired freedom. We sold the house 3 months later. A good price, enough to buy tickets for the 3 of us and start a new life in Denver, Colorado. As far from Waterloo as we could plan. The night before departure, I returned to the backyard one last time. The lemon tree was still there, its leaves swaying in the night breeze, keeping our secret. I picked a lemon, feeling its weight in my hand, the sharp, fresh smell. It was the last fruit I would take from that house. A bittersweet reminder of the price of our freedom. When the bus left the Waterloo station the next morning, I looked out the window, watching the city recede. Mom held my hand, her fingers intertwined with mine with renewed strength. William was sitting across the aisle, looking forward, as if he didn't want to give even one more look to the past. "We'll be okay, won't we?" Mom asked quietly. "We will," I replied, squeezing her hand. Now we're 13, life. After 54 years have passed since that night under the lemon tree. A lifetime. Today at 72, sitting on the porch of my house in Cedar Rapids, I see the world with different eyes. Time doesn't erase certain memories, but it teaches us to live with them, to find peace, even while carrying scars. Our life in Denver was a fresh start. Mom reopened her small sewing shop, which prospered over time. William became a respected mechanic, eventually opening his own shop. And I, with the determination of someone who knows the value of freedom, finished my studies and became an elementary school teacher. It was in Denver that I met Harold, a gentleman, a math teacher at the same school where I began teaching. At first, I was afraid to get close. The captain's ghost still haunted me, making me distrust any male authority figure. But Harold was different. He never raised his voice, asked for my opinions, respected my silences when I didn't want to talk about the past. We married in a simple ceremony, just family and a few close friends. Mom cried throughout the celebration. Tears of joy finally. William was my best man, proud in his well-pressed suit. So different from the young man who almost lost himself in the shadow of a cruel man. Harold and I had 2 children, Robert and Lucy. I raised them with all the love and freedom that were denied to me in childhood. I never raised a hand to them, never used fear as an educational tool. I taught them about respect, equality, and the importance of defending the most vulnerable. Mom lived with us until the end of her life, surrounded by affection and respect. Little by little, that woman who had been reduced to a shadow began to shine again. She became the grandmother who told stories, who taught old recipes, who laughed with her grandchildren. She passed serenely at 76 in her sleep with a smile on her face, an end so different from what could have been. William married Mary, a young Denver teacher, and had 3 children. Our relationship, once marked by resentments and silences, transformed into a solid friendship. We never spoke openly about that night. But there was a silent understanding between us, a bond forged in the most extreme moment of our lives. For 30 years we built our life in Denver. I taught, took care of the family, cultivated a small garden in the backyard, perhaps inspired by the lemon tree left behind, but planting only things that brought beauty and healing, never secrets. The move to Cedar Rapids happened after retirement. Harold and I wanted a quieter place, closer to nature. Robert was already established in Chicago as an engineer, and Lucy worked as a doctor in Minneapolis. It was just the 2 of us again, free to choose a new path. We chose Cedar Rapids by chance. Or maybe it wasn't chance. We visited the city during a vacation trip, and I was enchanted by the simplicity of the place. With the Cedar River cutting through the landscape, with the human warmth of the residents. Perhaps unconsciously, I was seeking to return to Iowa, not to relive the past, but to make peace with it. We bought this little house on Lilac Street with a yard big enough for me to expand my passion for plants. Harold, always supporting my interests, helped me build beds, install an irrigation system, research medicinal herbs I could grow. It was here on this piece of land that I found my true calling. At 45, I started studying books on phytotherapy, then took distance courses, participated in meetings with local herbalists, learned from the region's elders. I transformed knowledge into practice, growing herbs, preparing home remedies, helping neighbors with simple health problems. Harold passed 5 years ago, victim of a sudden heart attack while working in the garden we loved so much. It was a painful loss, different from all the others I'd experienced. There was no violence, no cruelty, just the natural cycle of life completing itself. I cried for my companion of 4 decades. For the gentle man who taught me that not all men are like the captain. Epilogue. The Garden of Healing. Today my routine is simple and rewarding. I wake with the sun, have my coffee watching the birds that visit the garden. I spend mornings tending to plants, harvesting what's ready, planting new beds when the season allows. I prepare my teas, ointments, and tonics in the kitchen Harold renovated especially for this purpose with wooden counters and shelves full of labeled jars. In the afternoons, I receive visitors, neighbors who come for remedies for joint pain, young mothers worried about children's colds, elderly people looking for something to improve sleep. I don't charge for these impromptu consultations. I just accept what they offer in exchange. A homemade cake, fresh eggs, the promise of a Sunday visit. Robert and Lucy visit me whenever they can, bringing my 5 grandchildren. The house fills with life, laughter, stories. They love the garden, especially the aromatic herbs area where the smell of rosemary, basil, and lavender mixes with the aroma of wet earth after rain. My grandchildren call me Plant Grandma. They don't know much about my past, just enough to understand that I wasn't always the serene grandmother they know today. Robert and Lucy know more, of course. I told them parts of the story when they reached adulthood, omitting only the darkest details. They understood, or at least accepted, that certain choices are made in circumstances I hope they never need to face. When the grandchildren ask about the 2 front teeth that aren't natural, even with the modern prosthetics I have today, I just say it was a childhood accident. A half-truth that spares their young minds from stories too heavy to carry. On stormy nights when the wind shakes the windows and thunder makes the house tremble, I still wake startled sometimes. For a brief moment, I'm back to that night with the gun in my hands, my heart racing. But then I look around, see the walls of my house in Cedar Rapids, smell the herbs drying in the kitchen, and return to the present, to safety, to the peace I conquered at too high a price. I don't regret what I did. Maybe that makes me a terrible person in some people's eyes. But when all options end, when the system that should protect becomes complicit in abuse, all that remains is the most difficult choice of all. To survive. Sometimes when I'm alone in the garden talking to my plants, as if they could hear me, I think about how strange life is in its paths. How that scared girl from Waterloo with 2 teeth missing, and a body marked by years of abuse transformed into this white-haired lady who grows healing herbs. Maybe that's what I do in the end. Cultivate healing for others with my herbs and knowledge for myself, with the daily ritual of putting my hands in the earth. Caring for living beings, transforming what could have been just bitterness into something that benefits others. The neighbors respect me. The street children call me Miss Martha of the herbs, and come asking for stories and homemade ginger candies. No one here knows about the lemon tree in Waterloo, about the captain, about the night that changed everything. They only know the quiet lady who lives in the house with the flowering garden, who always has tea to offer, an attentive ear to listen to problems, and maybe it's better that way. We aren't just our most difficult choices, our most extreme actions. We are the sum of everything, the traumas and the healings, the falls and the recoveries, the nights of despair and the mornings of hope. Today, sitting on my porch, watching the sunset paint, Cedar Rapids sky with shades of orange and pink, I feel a deep gratitude for the life I built from the ashes of what could have been just a tragedy. The lost teeth were replaced. The physical scars faded with time. The emotional scars are still there, but I learned to live with them, to transform them into wisdom, into understanding for others' pain. This is my legacy for my children and grandchildren. Not the violence of one night, but the strength of all the days that followed. The ability to start over, to bloom even in the most unlikely soil. The certainty that no matter how dark the night, dawn always comes. And when it comes, we can choose to plant a new garden. My dear ones, who have accompanied me this far, I've shared with you a story I kept hidden for a long time. It's not easy to relive certain memories, but I believe our testimonies have power when shared with those who need to hear them. If you're living in an abusive situation, I want to tell you from heart to heart, you are not alone. You don't deserve what you're going through. And most importantly, there is a way out of this hell. I've learned that age doesn't define our strength, but rather our ability to start over each day. When I think of the girl I was, afraid to breathe in my own home, and the woman I became, I see that it's never too late to seek a different life. My wrinkles are maps of survival. Each one tells a story of pain overcome. I carry visible and invisible marks, but none of them completely define me. They are just parts of the journey that brought me here to this moment when I can share my story in the hope that it helps someone. Life taught me that even in the deepest darkness, our inner light never goes out. In the darkest moments, when everything seemed lost, something inside me refused to give up. This small flame which we all have is stronger than any external storm. I never allowed my dignity to be stolen. Even when they tried to take everything from me, they could control my body, my movements, even my voice for a time. But my thoughts, my dreams, my essence, these remained untouched, waiting for the right moment to bloom again. I discovered that we are stronger than we imagine, especially when we think we can't take any more. It's in moments of greatest despair that we find resources we didn't know we possessed. Courage isn't the absence of fear, it's acting despite it. Time doesn't heal all wounds, but it teaches us to live with them and still smile. There are scars that never completely disappear, but we can transform them into reminders of our resilience. Not just our pain. My story isn't about what they did to me, but about how I chose to respond. Each of us has this choice, even when options seem limited. We can choose to survive. We can choose to start over. We can choose not to let abuse define who we are. I learned that true strength isn't in never falling, but in getting up every time. I fell many times throughout life. There were days when the weight of memories seemed impossible to carry. But every morning, I got up, took a deep breath, and took one more step forward. Abuse leaves invisible scars, but recovery shows that we can bloom, even after the storm. Like my plants that grow after heavy rain, we too can find strength to rise again, more resistant than before. I discovered that my voice, even trembling, has power when I decide to use it. For years, I stayed silent, believing no one would listen. Today, I know that sharing our truth, even in whispers, can be the first step to liberation. Age has given me wisdom to understand that it's never too late to start over. I built a new life at 18, reap another at 45, and continue creating new beginnings every day at 72. There's no expiration date for hope. My experience taught me that our story doesn't end in the painful chapters. The abuse, the violence, the pain, they are just parts of the journey, not the final destination. The true end of the story is the one we choose to write with our own hands. I learned that surviving is a form of resistance and living well is the best revenge. Every moment of joy I experienced after those dark years was a victory against those who tried to destroy me. If you or someone you know is going through a similar situation, know that in every country there are authorities and organizations ready to help. Seek information about protection in your region. Don't face this alone. There are people willing to support, to believe, to help. The signs of abuse are often subtle at first. Excessive control, isolation, humiliations that gradually increase. Be alert to these signs in your life, and in the lives of those you love. Early intervention can make all the difference. Dignity and respect are universal values, no matter where you are. No one has the right to hurt, humiliate, or control another person. This truth transcends borders, cultures, languages. As a global community, we have responsibility for each other. Don't close your eyes to others' suffering. Extend your hand, offer help, be part of the solution. Sometimes a simple, "I'm here for you," can be what someone needs to find courage. And now, my dear ones who listen to me this far, I make a special request. If this story touched your heart, if you felt a connection with what I shared, Please subscribe to the Grandparents' Tales channel and hit the bell right now. Your subscription is more than a simple gesture. It's a way to ensure these stories of overcoming reach more people who may be suffering in silence at this very moment. Share this video immediately with someone you believe needs to hear this message. Maybe you don't know it, but that friend, neighbor, or coworker of yours may be living their own private hell, thinking there's no way out. Your share could be the thread of hope they need to find courage. Leave the word freedom in the comments if you watch to the end. It's a way to show each other that we're not alone, that we form a community of people who care, who believe in the possibility of new beginnings. Do it now. Don't wait even one more minute. Your action could literally save a life. I end with the certainty that no matter how dark the night, dawn always comes. And when it comes, we have the chance to plant a new garden, to cultivate flowers where there were once only thorns. That's what I wish for each of you. The courage to believe in the dawn, even in the longest night.